X. It's John Michelle here from Mega Brain Comics, obviously, with more live, authentic nerdery for you. So today, I know this is kind of an early, just kind of an early broadcast, but it's because we're speaking to somebody that is drastically in the future from us here in New York. We're speaking to somebody that I've just been a big fan of in terms of the work that he does, and also a big fan of him, like his presence online on Twitter and so the other day I asked him if he'd be interested in chatting with us because he's got something new coming down the pike and just a ton of really great like independent comics that he's been creating for a while now that I wanted everybody to know about. So, without further ado, coming to us from South Wales, all the way across the ocean, I give you Mr. Joe Glass.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
Hey, hi
Thanks
Joe.
for having me.
Welcome.
Thanks
Welcome
so
to
much
New
for having
York.
me. It's been far too long since I've been to New York. It's great
Oh,
to be back.
have you been here?
Oh yeah, I've been a few times. I've been for New York Comic Con, and I actually studied in New York State for a period. So yeah,
Oh,
really
cool.
love the New York area.
So have you been like kind of I don't know if you know where kind of we are, but we're like about 2.5 hours north of Manhattan. Have you kind of been to like the other parts of New York, like kind
I
of
don't think I've
above?
been to that area of New York. I was studying in the Mohawk Valley at Utica College
Oh, cool.
when
Oh,
I came
actually,
to America. So
yeah. So Utica is actually, I think I want to say that's like a little more northwest of where we
oh,
are.
cool.
Yeah, but I know Utica very well. Um, so I guess to start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, where did you grow up? Like when did you get into comics, and what kind of comics were you reading when you were, when you started?
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in South Wales, here in the UK, in a place called Rhondda Valley. I lived there most of my life and everything, and then went to study in Aberystwyth, which is in West Wales, and then, like say, a period in America.
Nice.
And yeah, I just kind of it's a very much working class, old coal miner sort of town,
Oh,
kind of
cool.
place situation. So yeah, that's where I grew up and how I was raised. And the if love of comics probably started pretty early. I was always quite weird in that I never liked, not I don't want to say never liked. I never was into British comics. So like Dando and Beano, and
I just learned about Beano like a couple of years ago.
exactly, like all that kind of stuff. I was never really into it. I was never even really that into 2000 AD. I've never regularly read that, but I was regularly trying to anyway. American comics. When I was really young, it was very hard to get American comic books. But
Oh,
like
so
that
like
was
you
like what I
couldn't
was really
really
into.
like you couldn't just go down to the corner store and
Oh
get
no,
like
like
some Spider-Man
well,
or
you'd have like
X-Men.
news agents, and you'd have to be like lucky if the news agent that you went to stocked American comics. So like
Oh,
when you found one, it was like right, I gotta go there all the time.
gold.
Exactly. And that was kind of like how it was for a bit. I technically did read a technically British comic called Sonic the Comic for a while, which is technically my first comic.
Okay.
But I never really collected that. The time where the comics became like the thing I was like, I have to collect it, I have to read it all was like in the early 90s, and it was Generation X, when I was
Oh,
probably about 12-ish myself. And that was the thing which really got me addicted and really what made me
I
want
mean,
to become a comic creator.
that's the age. It's like right when you kind of hit like 11, 12 years old, whatever you really start to get into, I feel like is the stuff that like gets its hooks in you, you know?
Absolutely. Like I say, I've read probably a few comics before that, but like nothing was really like I like the medium, I like the idea of comics, but like nothing had really sort of grabbed me. And then Generation X happened when I was like say around 12, and all of a sudden it was just like, right, comics are my everything. That's it.
So so okay, so you're saying like you were getting your comics a lot of times at like news agents and stuff. I
Mhm.
mean, by the 90s here in America, it's every town had like two or three comic shops. So
Mhm.
like did you have like actual like comic shops in South Wales at all?
Not that I was aware of. I'm pretty certain they probably were, but, like, they were not anywhere that was close by to me, so therefore I didn't really know
Gotcha.
about them.
Yeah.
Like, the ne to be fair, even, like, now, when I was living at home for a period, the closest comic shop is in Cardiff, the nearest capital city, which was,
Oh
like,
yeah.
20 miles from where I lived. So and, like, that's where I would regularly go back and forth just to get my comic books, was, like, a 20-mile trip, like, an hour on a train kinda thing, just to get
Yeah.
comic books.
Jesus.
But like there are more comic shops now in the UK. The weird thing is now, obviously, that's the only place where you can get
Yeah.
comic books. But like when I was growing up, like you could potentially find them in other places,
Yeah, for us
which is
it
weird.
was supermarkets
Hmm.
and newsstands and like um where I grew up, we would call them like we had something that we called like the stationery store,
Hmm.
and it was just a place where like, my mom would buy like stationery, like fancy paper and greeting cards and things like that, but they also rented movies and like had some comic books, but it was like the strangest um it I guess it was like our suburban bodega almost. But that was where I started getting
Okay.
comics until I discovered the comic shop, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I
Um
think my first actual comic shop experience, I was probably about either 14 or 15. So it took
mhm.
me like a few years, even after sort of starting to get this love of comic books and have to start and like getting them, that I really actually went into a comic book shop.
Oh, cool.
And then like that was it for me then. I was just like it was all comic shops all the time then.
So they
Uh,
had like Marvel and DC and a lot of
yeah.
like kind of the mainstream American stuff that you were looking for?
Yeah, totally. Like for me, like the way I was reading American comics at the time, we were like a few, like say news agents, you get a few news agents who actually stocked American comics,
Mhm.
but they would always be a couple of months behind
Oh,
America,
gotcha,
you know?
yeah.
And there would be reprints as well, which were like published in the UK, which would collect American comics, usually about 2 or 3 issues in a single publication. And that was about a year behind um,
Yeah.
American
I
comics.
it's so like, I can't imagine.
Mm.
Like, I mean, even now, it's kinda hard for me to wrap my head around, what it would be like, I guess, kinda running a shop in a different
Oh,
country.
totally.
Like 2 of my friends, Danica and Brandon, they
Mhm.
have, variant edition comics up in Canada,
Oh, I know the
and
place, yeah.
a lot of times, like, kind of hearing the operational woes that they have to go through
Mm,
just to, like, get their books that we don't have to deal with here just because I guess, like,
yeah.
the books that they're getting are from here, which is, um, you know, understandable, like, I guess,
Yeah,
but yeah,
totally, and thankfully, once I found actual comic shops, even here in the UK, when it started, we just got them, I think it was, like, a day later than America, so, like,
oh,
comic book day
nice.
was Wednesday in America, and, like, I think here in the UK it was Thursday,
Oh, cool.
and then it was, like, maybe only about 4 or 5 years ago where I think they lined up to be the same, so that, like,
Yeah,
even here in the UK, we'll get them Wednesday, the same as America, which is great.
yeah.
So like by that point, I was just like, well, yeah, I'm all for comic book shops because I can actually stay up to date now.
Okay, so you were saying Generation X was
Mhm.
one of your favorite. What else were you kind of really into at that time?
So like I was totally obsessed with the X-Men, as pretty much any teenage queer boy probably was. And so Generation X was
Favorite
my
favorite
main one.
X-Men favorite X-Men character?
Oh, Chamber.
Oh, okay, nice.
Chamber from Generation X. Like it was a combination of I thought he was awesome. I thought he had an amazing superpower. He looks so cool. And there was an element of teenage boy crush on him. Because he had that broody 90s boy thing, which is just like, you had Angel and Buffy and like even Spike to an extent. It was just like, yeah,
Yeah.
broody boys were it, you know? So he was kind of the whole deal. But yeah, so Chamber would be very much it. I was very much about pretty much all X books at the
Okay.
time. So that like I remember quite vividly there was a pound store, so like a dollar store around the corner from
Oh,
my
yeah.
house, and they had American comic books. Like you could get like 5 for a pound.
Oh, nice.
And I would literally just grab all the X-Men comics out of it. They would never be in order, They would literally just be like random pics of
and
X-Men from
and you
any
just
old
have to
year.
hope that you can like kind of pick
Piece a
up the
story
thread on,
together,
yeah.
yeah.
Nice.
So,
That's, I
like,
mean,
I
that's
would get,
a
like
lot of what it was like for us too,
oh,
until you
yeah,
find a comic shop.
exactly, until you can find that place where you can actually get an actual sense of structure to
Yeah.
things again, you know? But, yeah,
Uh,
it was, like, back then, I think the big thing for me was, like, mainly X-Books. I was just grabbing anything which was X-Books, or Spawn. I was, when I was a teenager, I was really, big into Spawn for a while as
okay,
well.
nice. Which I'm still like kind of holding out hope that this Blumhouse movie like reboot ends up happening. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, I don't know how much confidence I have in Todd McFarlane directing, but I have a lot of confidence
Oh,
in
wait, is he supposed to be
Blumhouse.
directing himself?
That's the deal he set up.
Oh, okay.
So it's a little worrisome.
Okay, yeah,
But
we'll see.
we'll see what
Maybe if
happens. It has to be better than that original movie.
the weird thing
Um,
is I actually quite like the original movie. I mean, like, to be fair, I've not seen it in, like, 20 years. But, like, I remember quite liking it when I was
oh,
younger.
it was such a
But at the same time,
disappointment when
I
I
liked the
remember.
Joel Schumacher Batman films when they came out. Um
So I have a thing about those movies.
Mhm,
I really enjoy those movies when I look at them through the lens of the 66 Batman. My
yeah,
my theory is if Joel Schumacher had scrapped his like production design for those movies, and if
mhm,
he had just used the costumes, sets, the Dutch angles of like if he had which he actually did do all those Dutch angles in those movies, but
mhm.
if he had just made it look like the 66 Adam West Batman, I think those movies would have been like astronomical hits. But I
Oh, yeah.
think because of the fact that it was packaged so outlandishly different from what everybody
Mhm.
had known, because
And it was almost packaged like a continuation from Tim Burton ones, and
yeah,
it's so
which was the
visually different.
mistake. Yeah, it was such a
Exactly.
mistake to do that. But I digress. So when did you like start like when was the idea that you wanted to start writing comics? Like when did that happen?
It was like as I was going through my teen years. So like I said, I was reading Generation X. I was started collecting comics properly, reading basically any American comic I could get my hands on, and it became quite clear that like I really enjoyed them to the extent that this is what I want to do. I want to make them.
Yeah.
Now I got to admit, like when I first started with that idea, I thought I wanted to be an artist for comics, and
Okay.
that quickly got drummed out of
I
me.
feel like every kid was like,
Oh yeah.
I want to, draw these things.
Totally, and I like it very quickly got drummed out of me just because I was just like I very quickly learned that like I cannot do sequential art. Um,
Same.
I'm yeah, I'm a fairly competent artist. Like I'm not great by any stretch of imagination, but I'm a fairly competent for like a single big image, but like
Yeah.
or design work. But like as soon as you start to having to do like panels and actual visual storytelling, I'm out.
Yep.
Like I'm no
I
good.
I tried my hand at it because I wrote a comic book a few years back, and I was self-publishing,
Mhm.
and everyone was like, "Oh, cool! You're gonna illustrate it yourself." And I was like, "I guess I should. Like, I'm an artist. I can do that."
Yeah,
And within I think the first month, I had gotten through half of like one single page, and I was like, I can't do that. It's a
yeah.
skill set. It's an artistic skill set that like you really kind of have to go through boot camp for it.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely. And
yeah,
like when I what I kind of did like as part of my discovery of that process for that was I decided to do it as part of my A levels, which is like I think roughly equivalent to American SATs.
oh yeah,
And like I was doing an art degree, art as one of my subjects, and I was like, I'm going to make a comic as part of my A level degree.
oh god,
And in my head, and like when I did the brief, I was just like, I'm going to make a whole comic, a whole 24-page book. And by the end of it, I had a cover and a first page, and that was it. Like that was all I managed to do in the space of like a few months. Like it was all the design work. I'd written the story, And I think that was when I realized that, like, well, I've written the entire issue and I've
Yeah.
actually plotted out the whole story arc for a 6-issue series. So I was just
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe writing is what I do. And it was so weird because it was like a change in my brain structure almost. Because like when I was collecting comic books, I followed artists. Like I would
Yeah.
follow like an artist from book to book.
Especially in the
Whereas
90s. Like the 90s,
totally.
the art was such a like a huge focus on everything that was getting done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, like, when I started then thinking more like, well, actually, I'm going to write comics, I'm going to try and do that. Then I started following writers, like to the point where, like, and I'm not saying this is any stretch good thinking, but like this was very much teenage brain me thinking.
Yeah.
Was like I would like follow comic books and the artists on comic books, and I would have literally no idea who'd written it. And like I
I yeah.
almost didn't care kind of thing, which is awful, you know. But and then it completely flipped when I was like, oh, I want to be maybe I should write comics. And then it was just like, oh, suddenly I'm paying attention to the writers more. And that was when I sort of really clicked that, like, oh, you know, there's actually more than one person making these things. So yeah. That was like the big learning experience for me, and that was sort of when it clicked into place that what I want to do is write the stories.
Very cool. Well, speaking of writing stories,
Mhm.
we actually both have a friend in common who actually lives right here, like about 2 miles down the road
Oh,
from
cool.
me. Tyler Chintanner, who and Wendy Chintanner, who
Mhm.
both they created and run a Wave Blue World Comics, which puts out a lot of like some of the best independent comics that
Yeah.
are kind of being produced today. And a lot of that is anthologies. They do like these great anthologies where they kind of give voice and vision to like so many of the comic artists and writers
Mhm.
working today, including you, I believe,
Yeah.
in one of the newest anthologies to come out, Young Men in Love.
That's right. Yeah. It's going to be coming out. I believe it's Pride Month, so June. In most like towards the end of Pride Month,
Yeah.
for most comic book stores, and then like a general release to bookstores and everything like sometime after. I think like the following month or something. But
Mhm.
like Pride Month is the big where we're aiming for comic book shops to grab
Yeah.
Young Men in Love anthology, which I co-edited with Matt Miner. Like it was Matt Miner who actually approached me about doing it.
Okay.
And he had this idea that like maybe we should like about doing this book of male/male romance stories, but which were also by male queer creators
Okay.
who would have an extra level of authenticity because there is a lot of male/male romance fiction out there, like Heartstopper and things like that.
Yeah.
But they're written by women, and like that's awesome, and it's fantastic that they're out there, and I'm glad they're out there, and it's truly wonderful. But there's an element of the experience which they might not be
Well, they
able to
can't
relate to
possibly. Yeah,
understand.
they can't
Exactly,
understand.
they can't,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, so we wanted to have that sort of level of authenticity and create an anthology which had all queer male creators from the entire spectrum of like queer male identities. So whether it be like trans, cisgender, non-binary creators who have that experience and sort of have a romance story to tell, but because it's sort of and evoking the romance comics of the 70s, but also being a little bit of a twist on it because we were finding very quickly when because just told the creators like send us your pitches, send us your ideas, what you want to do, and they very quickly sent. It was very quickly evident, rather, that all these pitches which were getting sent in were all vastly different genres. So like we were very open to the idea. Like we never said like it has to be slice of life romance, like you often had in those old romance comics. We were like open to the idea of see what you want to do, and everyone pretty much did different genres. So we had like horrors, we had ghost stories, we had like sci-fi, super sentai, a pirate story. There's a bit of everything in
So
this
it's
book.
really so like the connecting thread is um is stories about young men in love, but
Mhm.
written by actual queer men,
Exactly.
which is
Actual queer
amazing.
male or queer male identifying creators,
Okay.
and actual and the only connection essentially really is that it's those kind of creators, but also that it's about young men in love,
So
and but like
with
other than that,
across the vast
exactly.
genre spectrum, so we're gonna get a little bit of everything in there.
Totally, exactly. And like I say, it's literally everything from like ghost stories, sci-fi, horror. We got a bit of everything, folklore and myth even.
Oh, cool.
And there are slice of life stories in there too. And honestly, there's some stories which are just absolutely truly beautiful. And I just remember when they got sent in, like even like there were some which was so moving, but like even I was shedding a tear because I was just like, this is gorgeous. And I'm so happy that we're putting this together to put it out there in the world because I think there's an audience for it who not only would enjoy it, not only would like it, but I think maybe really need it. And I think it
Yeah,
really needs to be out there. So I'm so excited that Tyler and Wendy agreed to work with us and put this thing together and are now getting the book out there because I think Young Men in Love is going to be something truly special.
cool. Well, and not to put you on the spot of like, but do you have maybe 2 or 3 favorite stories in there in particular that you maybe want to point out?
I
Without giving any spoilers, also.
yeah, without giving any spoilers and without saying anything, because all the stories are absolutely gorgeous. All of
Yeah.
them are absolutely perfection. But I will say there's a story about love in the pandemic.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
there's a
I
story
mean, cool, but
about
also, ugh,
oh
pandemic.
yeah, very very on the pulse, but also and it's very moving.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful story about sort of coming out and finding your first love in high school, and there is a awesome little story about loving camp, like in like
Oh,
a
like
going
summer
away to
camp?
camp, to a summer camp, yeah, but with some really wonderful fairy tale aspects to it.
Oh, cool.
And
So
honestly,
kind of like
that's I feel like
magical
I'm barely
realism?
scratching the surface. There's like as I'm
Well,
saying it, I'm just like,
yeah,
well, you know what? There's like about
that's why I was just saying maybe if you have like 2 or 3, like, in
yeah, and I'm
particular that
like,
you wanted
as
to.
soon as I say those ones, I'm just like, oh, but wait, that story. Oh, but wait, that story. I'm just like, it's honestly, I can't really pick 2 or 3. Like I've said those 2 or 3 to give everyone a nice little teaser of kind of stories they can expect, but there literally there's I think there's 20 stories in this book, and all of them are absolutely incredible. And
And you
I
worked
might
as
be saying a bit in my experience. Yeah, I just realized incredibly big headed. One of those stories is mine. But yeah, they are absolutely
Yeah, but
amazing.
I
I think
okay, honestly, I think that's actually fantastic because one of the things that I think most artists and writers always have trouble doing, or I can't say most, but many that I know have trouble doing is saying, by the way, I made this thing and it's fucking awesome.
oh no, totally. Like it's
Yeah,
something I've like actively decided to try and like fight against a little bit. Because like it's not just like an artist creator thing. It's very much part of British sensibilities. Like you do not big yourself up in Britain.
yeah,
It's just not done. You don't do that.
yeah.
And
Well,
I realized
that's
like
what we're here for. We're here to make sure
yeah,
everybody
but at the
knows that
same
you're
time,
amazing.
like when you're on things like social media and stuff like that, like people pay attention to that. Like like if you're not willing to like say, but yeah, no, I did this thing and it's absolutely freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Some people might feel a little bit like, well, they don't seem
Then
that
why
confident
should
in
yeah,
it.
why should I read it then?
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
it got to the point where I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna be realize I'm gonna be more what's the word I'm looking for? I'm just gonna pick myself up where needed,
Yeah,
because it's
I think having a healthy ego is
absolutely.
necessary when you're especially when you're a creative. Like
Yeah,
if you're
and
making
it's easy to do with Young Men in Love because, like I say, it's I co-edited it. I do have a story in it, but like
yeah,
my story is like a 6-page story. This
okay.
book is over 100 odd pages and
Yeah.
has like 20 stories in there. So like when I'm bigging this up, I'm bigging up all of them. Like they are and they are truly wonderful. Like
Cool.
literally, like I say, there's ones which make me cry, there's ones which make me laugh. I think this book it's the book really, which I think was and again, this probably sounds big-headed or anything, but I think it's the book which is most likely to get award attention
I hope
um,
so. It
because
sounds
it's so good.
fantastic.
Like not to put too fine a point on it, but it's just so good. It's just so good.
Well, for anybody that does see this, that you can go to my website, megabraincomics.com, and we have it available for pre-order. Especially like right now, if you go to our website, you can click on the Joe Glass banner at the top, and then it'll take you right to it. And also in there we have something that the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was your comic book, The Pride, is in there. Which well, can you tell us a little bit about overall? You have an imprint called Queer Comix, Queer
Yeah,
Comix with a K, with an X.
yeah, Queer
Yeah,
Comix with an X at the end,
yeah.
instead of a
And
CS.
so, what books do you produce under that imprint? And can you tell us a little bit about them and about the Pride?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, Queer Comics is the story of the Queer Comics imprint is basically I made a mistake. Back in the day when I was self-publishing, even the Pride, I was getting them on Comixology Submit, and there was a bit in it where you have to put like a publisher logo slash name.
Yeah.
So I assumed I meant, oh right, I have to like create a little imprint name, I guess, and like do a little logo as if we've got a publisher. So that was where Queer Comics was born. Like I was like, oh,
Okay.
we'll call it Queer Comics and we'll just do this.
Comics.
Um,
By the way, let's pour a little bit out for Comixology.com. God, I miss it. Have you seen it
um,
lately? By the way,
I don't know how much
Uh,
I can say about it.
I'm not, okay. Yeah, I'm not gonna go up against the Bezos machine, but all I'm gonna say is that I used to go onto Comixology um, at least once a day,
Mhm.
sometimes multiple times a day, and I opened it. I think it was about a month ago or so, and I
Yeah,
haven't opened it since.
I have heard that the web browser isn't ideal.
Not ideal.
Yeah,
So, and that's all I'll say about that.
it's
um,
yeah, because anyway.
so Queer
So yeah, I
Comics
created this sort of
started.
idea of this queer comics.
Uh,
I like a lot of other people, however, just did like their name, and I'm like, oh, why didn't I? Oh, okay. So queer comics existed, and then at that
that's
point,
how
I'm just
Mega
like,
Brain
well, I
Comics
guess I'll
started.
just yeah. And I was just like, I guess I'll just publish everything under that sort of thing. So anything which was self-published gets put under queer comics. And then like the Pride was under that, and then obviously the Pride got picked up by Comixology for Comixology's originals line
Mhm.
to continue the series, which then obviously went into print with Dark Horse. And the Pride is like the main big thing for me. And
So
that was
can you tell us what is the Pride about?
yeah, sure. So the Pride is all about a team of all LGBTQ superheroes. The idea when I created it, when I started this book, it was like nearly 12 years ago now. There wasn't a great deal of LGBTQ representation in superhero comic books. And what there was, like the queer characters, either were almost invisible, they were like what I would like to call like a glass closet. Like they were there when they were there.
Yeah.
Um, but they would either be next to silent, you know, like a background character at best, or really only have one story to tell, and that would usually be like a coming out story or something like that. And then they would also be, and I loathe the term, but like straight acting in the sense of like, unless you had a moment with them having a coming out story or being like, I'm gay or whatever, you wouldn't
Yeah.
know. They like there was nothing really to say it, to accentuate it, to just communicate it.
There
So
was nothing that actually proved
yeah,
that this character
because
was
you very
gay,
rarely got
other than the fact.
romances
Yeah.
in there as well, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, like part of doing the Pride was I wanted to do a superhero book which was just fun and awesome, but had a really broad range of LGBTQ representation. Because again, what representation there was in superhero comics was pretty like uh
Lacking.
narrow viewed. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it was like a white gay guy or a white gay girl, and that's pretty much it, you know.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be like, right, let's diversify this because there's like so much more like in the community. Like there's a bunch of other letters which are just being ignored. So let's just try and do it all. And the Pride, and that was kind of the thesis behind the Pride, and it was just about doing fun superhero stories because I wasn't a fan of grimdark superhero stories either.
Yeah.
I liked it when they were fun and when it was like exciting to the idea of being a superhero was exciting and enthusiastic. So that was what Pride was this team of all queer superheroes fighting for representation, diversity, and equality, and just justice for all.
Cool.
And yeah, we did one season of the Pride and Pride Adventures, which were like short self-contained stories, which were all done self-published. And then
Okay.
we got picked up by Comixology Originals to do a second season,
So
which
they
then
approached you and were like, "Hey, can you do more of this for us?"
I approached them technically.
Okay.
Like they announced their originals line. I was very
Oh,
excited
yeah, I
by
do
the
remember
idea.
that. And
Exactly.
they had sent an email to everybody saying, "Hey, yeah, I sorry.
Yeah, and I kind of knew them because I'd met them a couple of times at New York Comic Con, and they were always really supportive of the Pride when it was on Submit.
Nice.
And I went up to them at I think it was Thought Bubble here in the UK one year, and just suggested to them like, "Oh, here's something I'd like to do. I'd really like to continue the Pride, but I need help to do it. Do you think you'd be interested?" And lo and behold, we were. And we did a second
Nice.
season, which went really well. And then obviously, like I say, it got collected in print with Dark Horse Comics in
Mhm.
the Pride Omnibus.
Yep.
So the Pride Omnibus is essentially 10 years worth of my life in comic book writing in one book. It's like, I think it
Nice.
works out as like 17 issues worth of comics in one book. And it's just like all there, a broad, diverse range of LGBTQ superheroes by a broad, diverse range of creators as well. Because I had all kinds of artists on it. I even had a few other writers involved in some of the short stories. So yeah, we just kind of had a lot to do. And the big hope is there'll be a lot more Pride in the future.
Cool.
So in my mind, the Pride is an ongoing story. There's going to be more. So like that's the big one. And then other
So
queer comic book
do you
releases.
have a favorite character?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Who is it?
I love them all, like, but
Well,
I
they're
would
all your
say,
children.
well, yeah, exactly. um, but I'd say, like, if there was to be a favorite character, it's probably Fabman,
Okay, and what's his
because
deal?
so Fabman is tomorrow's fabulous man today, and he's kind of like this sort of Superman crossed with Green Lantern kind of combination character.
Cool.
So like because the idea with do creating the certainly the initial run of Pride characters was to make them archetypes of superheroes.
Yeah.
Because like if with when you do an archetype, with even with a brand new superhero,
It connects
a
with
reader
more.
goes in feels like they know them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
the
mean,
idea
it's
was
one of the
fine
reasons
because
why I loved
oh thank
Invincible
you.
when it came out. Like
Yeah,
it like, what's his name? Oh my god. Robert Kirkman. Sorry.
yeah,
Robert
exactly.
Kirkman, like, totally understands that
Exactly. And it
and
was just
kind of
like it would you then get the opportunity to twist it on its head and add
yeah,
something new to it and everything. And so that's kind of like what I did with Pride. And Fatman is essentially that. But like the thing I think I love most about Fatman is he's a character who has a lot of me in him, I think, in the sense of I'm absolutely not a 6 foot tall gym bunny in pink short pants. I can't pull that off. Um, but he is kind of camp and I can be pretty camp as well. And I feel like that is so rarely seen in media, like a flamboyant gay man who is
especially as a superhero.
yeah, as a superhero and as a hero and as a
Yeah.
tough guy as well, could be
Yeah.
like isn't just the butt of a joke. And don't get me wrong, Fat Man is a little bit the butt of jokes sometimes, but it's because more of another aspect of his character, which I love, and that's how he always sets out to do the right thing, but he's got a big mouth and he tends to let it lead him more than his head. So he's often putting his foot in it. And I like that because like I can relate to our idea of like you want to
Well,
do the good thing.
and you don't want your heroes to be perfect. Like
Exactly.
everybody wants to kind of see themselves in the characters that they're reading a little bit. And no,
Mhm.
like, I mean, it's a cliche, nobody's perfect, but
Yeah.
when you're able to kind of like read the flaws in some of these heroes and you're like, "Oh my god, I can totally relate to that. That totally tracks." And
Yeah.
it brings you into the story
And it's
a
what
little
makes
bit
him fun
more.
to write.
Yeah, I can
Like
imagine.
literally writing any scene with him is always fun. Um, so like as such, like he's probably my most favorite character to write in Pride. And I'm very excited about where I hope to take him in the next season of the
So,
Pride that we're doing.
have you started plotting the next season of it?
I've started plotting the next three.
Oh
um,
wow.
yeah, so I personally am well ahead on it.
Oh, very cool.
So it's just a matter of getting it out there. So we'll see how that goes.
All right.
But fingers
Well,
crossed there'll be more out.
for anybody that's interested, like I said, if they go
Mhm.
to our website, we have a few copies left. And actually right now, while you're watching this, they're $10 off if that makes a difference. And then you can catch up on the Pride and everything before the next seasons kind of
Be
spin
ready for
up.
whatever the next steps are. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, so it sounds like you really at some point were like you saw the deficit in
Mhm,
the comic book industry and decided that you wanted to kind of kind of plug that up and
mhm.
contribute to like filling that. So is are there any other aspects of the comic industry that you'd like to see some changes in, and like what, like, and in what ways, I guess?
Um, I suppose the big ones is just I'd like to see more accessibility into breaking in for new voices.
Hmm.
Just because like so much of the industry as it stands is just the same voices over and over again, and the same voices getting platformed, and it can be very difficult, and not just for LGBTQ creators, but like creators of color, creators of disability,
Yeah.
just
It's
various.
always really
Oh yeah.
felt like kind of an inner circle that, like,
Hmm.
and then anytime it is changing a bit
Yeah.
from my in my perspective, but
It's changing, but it's changing too slow. I
yeah,
feel like there needs to be a stronger and more concerted effort to get out of that mindset that I feel the industry is very locked into.
yeah. I feel like it's in large part because there's almost no transparency in
Mhm.
how the industry operates.
Yeah.
Like, it's still very much a mystery how the publishing aspects of
Oh yeah.
comics work, and it's
Like just
still,
look at how many times you get a new series come out from say like a Marvel or DC or anything,
yeah,
and people will still say like, "Oh, I'll wait for the trade." Even though like by waiting for the trade, by the time the second issue is solicited, that book's cancelled.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
because like
It's like
everyone
they're
waits
not
for
going to make a trade for you if like nobody cares about this book right now.
exactly, and like to be even like for me as a comic book creator, that's not something I learned until working um in comic books for a while, and also in the sidelines working as a comic book reporter with a website before as well, and just sort of seeing that happen and just seeing a bit of the behind the scenes and just being like, oh, well, if people realize this more, then maybe more people would be there from the ground running.
I feel like that's a really big I want to say it's a really big kind of black mark against in the box of the publishers. Like
Mhm.
they are, I know they spend a lot of money on marketing and stuff like that, but they're
Yeah.
not really doing it very well or in the right places. For a couple of years now, a lot of people end up kind of hearing me talk about this all the time, and I'm probably sure they're tired of it. But we have a multi-billion dollar
Mhm.
comic book film industry that's happening
Yeah.
right now, whether it's in actual film or on streaming services or on actual television. And all of these properties started as these things, as these comics,
Exactly.
and that are still being put out every month. But I never see a commercial for this thing. Like,
The
why?
wildest thing
What?
was recently I went to see the Batman,
Yeah,
in the cinema, and DC did that.
they did.
There was an advert, there was a trailer before it about buying the comic books,
Oh
and
my
I was just like,
god!
"That
So
is amazing." Like, that
I
is
have
like, why
been
has this not been done in
crowing
every
this for
comic
so
movie?
long. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
like,
was
oh,
so great.
are you interested? You're excited to see this movie that you're about to watch. Well, guess what? Tomorrow, if
Exactly,
you go to the comic shop, you can get this thing, and like, give us commercials about like story arcs that are about to happen. Give
exactly.
us give us commercials about I mean, just the stories that had
Mhm.
inspired the thing that you're about to
Exactly.
watch. It's like, here, get a trade for year one, get a trade
Yeah,
for
I feel like a
Long
lot of
Halloween.
the press outreach at the moment, or PR outreach from particularly the big 2, tends to be almost aimed at the comic shops, which is
Yeah.
like, yes, that's great because absolutely they've
But
got to
that's
also
how
win.
it's always been. They
Yeah,
always put it in the hands of the shops to do the work of
exactly.
selling their product. And it's like, no, you sell your product like
Mhm.
to everybody else and we'll make sure they get it, you know?
Exactly, and particularly when you're thinking about, like, how the pre-order system and everything works, it's like, if you sell to the audience, they will pre-order it, but
Yeah.
you're not telling them that they have to do that.
Yep. Like
You're
I
they just
just
expect,
watched
"Oh, I'll go to
Moon
the comic
Knight.
shop and get one," you know, and
Yeah. Like Moon Knight is, everybody's been waiting for this TV show. And then, like,
mhm,
I sat down, watched it, the day it hit. But it's like when I hit play, first thing that I should see is
mhm,
like, hey, if you enjoy this episode, then go out and get this awesome Jeff Lemire trade, or like
no.
anything. But
Like,
we
I
get
think I
nothing.
saw yesterday, the director, I think, of the Moon Knight TV show specifically mentioned the Lemire and Smallwood run,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's awesome, but, like, that's in an interview on a platform
that
somewhere, so,
that
like,
that a handful of very niche group of people are going to be watching that thing.
exactly. Whereas, like, if it is, like, as you say, like, right before the show or something, then, like, everyone who watches the show is going to see that.
Yeah,
So
like we're watching Nerdist and we're watching,
mhm,
CBR and all that stuff, but, my neighbor who's like, "Oh, they got this new show starting tonight," who doesn't, like, ever know anything about this stuff, isn't gonna be watching any of that or reading any of it.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly, and it's a missed opportunity, I think, on the part of most of the comic book industry,
yeah.
that we put so much of the pressure on the comic shops to do the job of pushing it to, and not just the comic shops, also the creators. And the thing is, like,
Yeah,
I'm not in PR. Like, I haven't got the
yep.
first frigging clue. And the
Half of
best
my
I've
Twitter
got,
feed are creators like you saying, "Hey, guess what? I've got this thing coming out, like,
yeah.
please retweet this so that other people know about it."
Please buy. I don't really know
Yeah.
how to, exactly. I don't know how to advertise it. Like that
Here's the
never
pre-order code, and like people are like, "What the hell is a pre-order code?
pre-order
Like,
code.
can I just
Exactly.
buy it? Like, where do I get this thing?" Like, it's ridiculous.
It doesn't help, but like we are living in a world of streamer culture and binge culture where people like
Yeah,
binge, literally, like you get like Stranger Things will get dropped on Netflix and most people will watch it all in a day and
yeah,
it's gone. People, when it comes to books and things like that, they're not that interested in pre-ordering things anymore. They want it now.
yeah,
They want to hit a button and get it, you know?
yep.
So it's like one of those things where just like that's great, but like you should be not the comic book shops and certainly not really relying on the creators either. The publishers behind them should be making a concerted effort to
The
put that
people,
right in front of people and be hit this button, you'll buy it right away.
yeah,
You
like
know?
the people that have billions of dollars and marketing departments and advertising budgets should be
Exactly.
doing all of that stuff.
And it's like, don't get me wrong, like creators will still do that. Like we
Yeah,
like even if
it's
there
just
was that whole concerted effort, I would still be going on Twitter and be like, please buy my books, you know? So
yeah.
but like
A, a really good friend of mine is an agent,
mhm,
and she was telling me this story about how one of her clients had this amazing book that he had made, and
mhm,
they, it was getting published, and they were trying to get bookshops and everybody just to know about it, and there was just
mhm,
no traction on it, and she was like, it's phenomenal, and there was
mhm.
just nothing. And then he decided, like, to start a TikTok account, and he just
Yeah.
started this TikTok and he started making stupid videos, and then, like, he got like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers and like all this stuff and people that were following him and stuff like that. So it ended up, the day that the book got released, it hit the New York Times bestseller
That's
list,
amazing.
and which is awesome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, he should not have had
Yeah.
to have done, like, it's great that he did that, and it's lucky that he
Mhm.
was able to garner that much attention, but like, who else, like who can do that, you know?
Exactly, and it's such a roundabout way to go about it, you
Yeah,
know? Whereas, like, they feels like it was more straightforward thing, and I should probably say as well, like, when, the Pride was coming out with Comixology and Dark Horse, etc., and a few of other projects, like, I've had PR companies who have worked, like, really hard at getting these books out in front of readers, and they did fantastic jobs. I think the issue isn't necessarily with the PR companies that we have. It's so much the structure of how it works, like
yeah,
how everything's based on
the
a
system is
pre-order
broken.
system.
Yeah.
Exactly, a pre-order system, which a lot of people just don't understand.
Hmm.
Particularly when we're talking about people who are not regular comic book readers,
Yeah,
and those are the people we need to reach out to because the regular comic book reader, it's an aging demographic, and like
yeah,
we're
and
gonna
it's
get to
also
a point
preaching to the
where
choir, like, no matter
yeah,
what, like the older comic book reader, like, we're all almost like addicts, you
mhm.
know, and it's
Exactly,
like
we'll just buy
we're
it
yeah,
anyway,
we're just gonna go out and seek it wherever it is. But yeah, like, to get newer people, you have to make it easier for them to, like, be able to do this.
Yeah, and whenever anyone sort of talk and comic book sales thankfully have been on the rise year on year, for like the last 5 years or something, I think, and
Yeah,
that's amazing. And they did particularly well in the pandemic, which is great
yeah.
to know because that was a really hard time for everyone.
Oh, yeah, I
Uh,
mean, we thankfully survived because of
yeah,
that.
so many people didn't, and that's just like so. It's such a shame to think of like how many comic shops were lost and how
Oh,
many
yeah,
comic book creators maybe have even had to pack it in and everything just because they just couldn't financially do it anymore.
yeah,
And it just feels like, thankfully, those things are happening, but we're still getting more and more. But it is definitely still a case of there's more audience out there because when you look at the fact for like say manga sales or OGN sales out of the traditional superhero comic book genre, so
yeah,
like Raina Telgemir's work and things like that, there is quite clearly a vast audience out there which we are still not reaching
yeah.
in the traditional comic book form and in comic book genres like superheroes and the monthly releases, etc. And it just makes me think like, well, why aren't we? Like, what are we not doing that they are, and they are doing very successfully? And like,
Well, like,
why aren't we doing it? Yeah.
like, the graphic novel industry, like, particularly, like, Raina Telgemeier kind of,
Mhm,
um, like, branch of it, like, that kind of all ages slash YA,
mhm,
you have like a publisher like Scholastic who understands like, okay, we have to get this stuff in front of the eyes of the
mhm,
people who are going to ask for it. So I mean, since I was in elementary school, Scholastic has been marketing at schools with like
exactly.
their little Scholastic, book, order form during their
Mhm,
book fairs and stuff. So like they clearly understand like how this can and should work.
mhm,
But for some reason, all your Marvel, DC, Image, everybody else
mhm,
is just like, no, we're doing fine. It's not broken. Let's just keep doing stuff the way we have been for 30
exactly.
some odd years.
And like, it's kind of like you can see why they do because like they've got obviously enough, like they've got enough of an audience that will keep them going and they're happy with
But
that.
like
Whereas
you
if you
said,
start
they're
getting
aging
more
out.
new, exactly. They're aging out, or even worse, like some are getting like going exactly the way everywhere where it gets to a certain age, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, at some point this audience is going to start diminishing. You need to start getting in new audience and in particular younger readers. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be YA books or like all ages books to do
Yeah.
that. Literally, the superhero comic books we're doing now could be reached out to that audience. We're just not doing it.
I'm thoroughly impressed with I I was always a mainly a Marvel comics, like floppy comics
Mhm,
fan, and I still am to a certain extent. Like the new She-Hulk is like
mhm.
really fun and amazing, but for the past couple of years, DC Comics has really stepped up their
Oh
game
god, yeah. They've
with
really
with
upped their game.
their writing, their art, like all of it, and
Mhm,
I'm impressed with just the comic book company that they've become,
mhm.
which I wish that I felt the same way about their movies, but that's a whole other podcast. But yeah, their comics, they're doing amazing. And for
Mhm.
once, I'm like, Marvel, you should, you know, take a page out of their book and
Exactly.
try doing what they're doing, you know? I don't know. But you know, it's a very large broken system with a lot of cogs and gears and things like that. So,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Like,
do
I think, like, we could talk till the cows come home about this, and, like, but I think neither of us are really trying to say that it's simple.
oh
It's
no, it's definitely
whatever needs
not
changing.
simple.
Yeah, and we're not even saying that we necessarily have the answers, but, like, whatever needs change, what we're saying is that we recognize there needs to be a change.
Yeah,
And it's probably not gonna be easy, and it'll probably be very difficult, as a matter of fact, and there are probably all a host of ideas of how to do it. But, like, the main thing that we do know is that what is currently happening works, but in a finite way.
yeah,
And that is going to get to a point where that's not going to work anymore. And we need to
yeah,
start thinking about how can we change this.
yeah.
And hopefully we'll get there because like and I think we are. I think there's certainly a lot of
It's
interesting things.
gotten exponentially better than
Yeah.
it was, but it still has a long way to go.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that that same kind of change can also then stretch back into the creators involved as well,
Yeah,
and bringing in more different voices with different things to say um, to like the big comic book companies, and even and not just like the big two. I mean, also like things like Boom and Image and
yeah,
everyone. Like they, it would be great to have some different voices because I love Image, I really do, but like a lot of Image books are just by the same
yep.
people, you
And
know.
there was like a little golden period where there was so like I want to say like 10 or 12 years ago, there
Mhm.
was like this really like big bloom of like just random Image comics that were being made.
Totally.
But I feel like at some point in um that little bloom of creativity, they found like, oh, this person is really doing well. This person's really doing well. And like you said, they just kind of keep
Yeah.
cranking out stuff by them and just kind of forget about all the other
Mhm.
folks that are like, I've got stories too, you know,
Exactly, exactly.
and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's all frustrating. I also feel like there should be um sort of a transparency when it comes to um sort of creator pay. Like
Yeah.
there's no real way to say, hey, I'm going to go into the field of comic book writing
Mhm.
and I know that you know, my pay will start at X, somewhere around X, and with the potential to go to Y.
I think there's a
And
lot of people out there who see the success of things like the MCU and things like that, and think they're like, "Oh, if I be a become a comic book writer, I surely can become a millionaire."
yeah,
Or something like
yeah,
that
but
because they'll make a comp of my story or make a movie of my story, and it's just like, no,
mm-mm.
that's like
Watch
comics
the
is
Ed
not.
Brubaker interview with Kevin Smith and Mark Bernard,
Exactly.
and then
And
you'll
it's not even like just that, like adaptation things, and particular of like even adaptations of creator-owned work does not necessarily mean that the
yeah,
original creators are being financially recompensed daily
yeah,
for it. And then there's also that idea that there's so many people who try to get into comics for the purpose of like, I'll become rich because someone will make a movie of it. And it's just like, well, firstly, if you're making a comic to be adapted into a movie,
then
that's probably going to turn out
you've
to be a really
already
bad comic.
failed.
Yeah, it's like because what you're basically doing is you're creating a storyboard, and like, but no one
Yeah,
wants to buy the storyboard. It's
yep,
like we want an actual comic.
yeah,
So there's definitely an element of that, and I think that there needs to be a better understanding that the comics lifestyle or creator comics creator lifestyle is tough financially,
yeah,
and may never actually wind up being something which you wind up doing entirely like living off that. I mean, like the number of even some of the big name comic book writers who have multiple jobs,
yeah.
and that's just not known publicly.
Well,
Like, so they just assume like, oh, that dude writes Batman or whatever, so he must be raking it in, and it's just like, no.
Well, out in Portland, which has become like comic book mecca for creators, um, you've got people like, Brian Michael Bendis and like Matt
Mhm.
Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick, and they're all like kind of living out there in this like Shangri-La oasis of like comic creativity. And they're also like teaching at like local colleges and stuff, like
Exactly.
teaching like writing and stuff like that, because it's like, yeah, like they're not raking in the dough for, all this stuff. So
Exactly. Like in terms of like the creators who are like not just financially stable, but like financially well off to the point of being completely comfortable, never have to worry about money again in their lives, you could probably count them on one hand.
oh yeah,
So, and like
absolutely.
I think that's what a lot of people don't, a lot of fans as well, in particular, don't realize. Not even just people who want to become creators,
Yeah.
like fans of comic books, maybe don't realize that no, actually, they this is a struggle. This is
Yeah.
hard work, and they are working hard to keep themselves afloat, not working hard to rake in the dough.
That's why
Just working
Artist
hard
Alley is always jam-packed with people, because they're there trying to make some money
to make
to,
that sweet,
like,
sweet
pay
coin.
their mortgage and their rents and stuff like
Exactly.
that. And so, actually, tip for anybody going to comic book conventions, if you go to Artist Alley and you walk up to a writer or an artist, please don't just ask them, "Is any of this free?" Because it's heartbreaking to hear that, because
Oh
they're
god,
there just trying to make some money. And so buy comics, buy
yeah.
their
Absolutely.
comics, buy artwork, like buy things with money, put it in their hands, please. um well, I think we've uh pretty much beaten that horse. So before we go,
Mhm.
to lighten the mood a little bit, can you tell us what are you currently geeking out on? Like, what are you reading, watching, listening to that's like getting you really excited?
Cool. So, oh god, reading like I'm reading like pretty much all the X-Men line at the moment. I'm really, really adoring the X-Men line, and pretty much anything by Tom Taylor as well. In terms
I
of like
love Tom Taylor. I
he's just really cranking out some of the best work ever. And like Superman, the Superman Son of Kal-El
yeah,
book
Son
at
of
the moment
Kal-El,
is just absolutely superb.
so good. He
That
is,
is to me peak superhero telling, storytelling, because like it's exactly where superhero should be. It's aspirational,
yeah,
it's
fun,
hopeful, it's fun, and for anyone being like, oh, if you're just gonna do that, there's ways for drama. It's fully dramatic. There's drama
yeah.
going on. It is a dramatic, powerful, and not just Superman Son of Kal-El, Nightwing, his Nightwing run. I don't
That is
read
one of,
Nightwing. I've never read Nightwing.
same.
I picked up his first issue of Nightwing with Bruno Redondo on it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and it is absolutely stunning. Like, it is a fantastic superhero book, and the artwork is gorgeous. It's, like, sublime.
I
That
think
issue where it was
Nightwing
just one
is,
continuous long thing, oh
it
my
is
god.
the definition of what a comic book, when you open the dictionary of comics, that's what.
It's there.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like,
um
those ones at the moment, totally geeking out on them. In terms of watch, I'm really enjoying the new Star Trek shows. Um, I was a big Star Trek geek growing up. The Next Generation was my jam.
Same.
Um, I totally loved it, and then like the Star Trek went away for the longest time, and it was just like that kind of saddened me. Like that was a big
Yeah,
part of my life for the longest time. And these new shows are very different, but they do have a lot of the same energy of the original Star Trek shows. So like I
yeah,
absolutely adore them. I'm very excited for Strange New Worlds,
I
which
cannot wait for Strange New
it
Worlds.
looks so good. Like every time that Twitter account drops one of those little meet so and so, I'm like, I gotta watch that immediately. Like I want
Yep.
to learn all about the I say new characters. Like so far they've
Yeah.
only done like the three characters who've been in it before.
Uh,
Because like Dr.
oh
Mabenga had been in it before, if I remember. Like he was like in an
yeah,
episode or two of the original series, I think.
yeah, exactly.
So like
um
that was awesome.
oh my god, I think it sounds like somebody is in my house right now.
Oh, okay.
Wait, hang on one second. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. Sorry, somebody. My friend's mother just came
Oh,
in to drop something off. Sorry about that, folks. Um, so yes, I'm really enjoying like all the Star Trek stuff too.
mhm.
My favorite is Lower Decks. I think
Yeah.
it's
I
the
wasn't thinking I was gonna enjoy it, but it's really good.
I think it's legitimately just good Star Trek. I was saying to my wife the other night, if they stripped all of the comedy out, it's still a really good Star Trek show.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So there's that. I didn't like the first season of Picard that much, but this
Mhm.
season I've seen the first 2 episodes already. Seems to be a little bit better. I've
Mhm.
got thoughts and feelings about the last season of Discovery, but we won't. That's like we'll be here for another hour.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose the only other thing I've been, like, really geeking out, over recently, and this is really new thing, well, new to me anyway, I've become weirdly obsessed with TikTok.
Oh,
Yeah, like, I've been on TikTok for a couple of years, technically,
yeah.
like, literally, it's just in the past week where I've literally started making TikToks and
Oh, cool.
finding it a lot of fun, so I'm just like, "Oh, this is actually
I
really
I
fun. So
have
yeah,
a
I've got a bunch of TikToks now.
I have a TikTok account for Mega Brain, but I
Mm.
never use it because I'm like I still haven't wrapped my head around it yet, but I'll follow you on there, and at some point, I guess when I wrap my head around it, like
Yeah, totally.
yeah,
No, it's the same for me. Like it didn't feel intuitive to me the way like other social media apps are.
yeah,
Though I have found that like now that I've spent a bit more time with it, it's like a lot of it's making a lot more sense now. I'm just like, okay. So I think it's just a hurdle which older generations jump over need to get over.
yeah.
But like the younger generations are like
Oh
cramming
yeah,
it
just
in immediately.
blazing through it.
But yeah, become weirdly obsessed with it. This week I've probably posted about like 30 TikToks this week alone. It's crazy.
Holy crap!
It's just a lot of fun to do. Like it's like when I've got like a half hour where I just need to like decrunch my brain after writing
Yeah.
all day and everything. It's just like, oh, just do a few TikToks. It's a
All
bit silly,
right.
it's a bit fun.
Maybe I'll start looking at your TikTok to get an idea of how to
Though I've
TikTok.
tried to do, like, some comic TikToks in the sense of, like, doing, like oh, like, I think I did one which was, like, oh, a day in the life of a comic book writer.
Yeah,
So I did, like so I'm trying to do, like, some comic-y ones,
yeah.
but it's a lot of, like, just gay TikTok, spicy TikTok kinda stuff like that, just, like, dirty jokes, silly jokes, that kind of thing. So
All
it's
right,
it's just a bit of
I'm
fun
gonna be
to
following you and looking at all the dirty jokes.
I have a very
Um,
strange sense of humor, to be fair.
well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to
Yeah,
talk with
sure,
me
thank you so much
today,
for
and
having me.
this was great, and I'm hoping that like maybe we'll be able to get to do like a lot more of these. I'm trying to like
Mhm.
ramp up more like kind of live streams with comic book creators, just because like we're still not totally ready to like just have a bunch of in-store things,
Of
but at the
course,
same
yeah.
time, I want to say one good thing that came out of the pandemic was
Mhm.
kind of this, like this
Discovering the new avenues you can use.
yeah,
Yeah,
like this
totally,
whole
yeah.
new virtual way of communicating with people that has become kind of the norm,
Mhm.
which like the more I've kind of gotten into it, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Like I can speak to a comic book writer in the UK right now without having to worry about, yeah, well, when you're flying into New York, we'll pay for you to come up here and like
Yeah,
come to the store, and like we could just talk to each other, which is amazing.
exactly,
And
yeah.
I love it. So we should do this more often.
Definitely. Oh, I'm up for it anytime.
And and for anybody that wants to learn more about Joe's comics and what he does, you can go to joeglasscomics.co.uk
Mhm,
and see everything that he's been creating. You can
mhm,
also go to our website, megabraincomics.com, and you can currently get his book, The Pride. And you can also pre order Young Men in Love, the anthology that we were talking about earlier from A Wave Blue World Comics. Um,
Fantastic. And a lot of
and
my other self-published work is all available via my website as well.
very
And there's a
cool.
newsletter. So if anyone wants to stay up to date with what I'm sort of doing and what's coming out for me, you can always sign up to the newsletter.
Very cool. And something that just popped in my head, I think maybe um when Young Men in Love comes out, maybe we can do kind of like a like a virtual forum with you, Tyler, and everybody else involved in the
Yeah, that would
book,
be awesome.
and just kind of have a big roundtable to kind of talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
That
That'd
yeah,
be really awesome. I mean, like a lot of the creators are based in America and sort of all around, but I think, yeah, it'd be really awesome if
yeah.
we
Oh well,
pop
you
in the
said
room.
there's 20 stories, so maybe not
Maybe
everybody
not
on
everyone.
it.
We'll have to ask around and like see who has the time and
Yeah.
everything. But yeah, totally. I think
Yeah, I think
I
that'll be a
personally think
fun
that would
kind
be
of
awesome.
Pride Month event that we could do.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. All right, cool. And okay, so when we sign off, I'll after we sign off, I'll say goodbye to you once we're off the air.
Cool, cool.
Um, but for now, thank you everyone for joining us, and for anybody that couldn't join us and that's watching this after the fact. Thanks for watching this. And we will see you next time. Cheers.